Today we're going to be looking at just random Canvas quiz features, just a bunch of random miscellaneous things that don't really get their own video because they're not long enough to do that. So we're just going to pile them all together. So the first thing that I want to look at is within quizzes, the different features up at the top. When we created our quiz, we were in the build section. So this is one of the quizzes that I use for my P&PS class. So I want to look at the settings, reports, and moderate. So settings, these are all the general settings for your quiz. It's going to cover every single question. The first two are shuffle questions and shuffle answers. Those are pretty straightforward. Shuffle questions is going to make it so that each student gets a completely randomized order of questions on there. So, number one on everybody's quiz is probably not going to be the same. Same thing with shuffle answers. It switches the options A, B, C, and D. If you have that checked, it will do it for every single question. The one exception being if when you set up the question, like was in the previous video, and you had the shuffle answers thing checked to always do that, but then you locked certain things into place, those things that are locked are not going to move. So those are going to just, shuffle the things. One question at a time. It only shows the kids one question at a time. They answer a question and then click the next button. They can mark the questions just like they can when they're taking it in normal, not one question at a time mode, where they can go back to review so they don't have to click through everything. They can just, click a number off to the side or up at the top. But if you want to maybe prevent a little bit of cheating that way, or just for whatever reason, if you decide you want to do it that way, by all means, go for it. Then require a student access code. So if you have this checked, it's going to require them to put in an access code. If you leave it unchecked, that means that they'll be able to get right into it. So if you want test security, you definitely want to have an access code. So you can type it in. If you want to see what you have, you can hit the check button and it'll show it there. This is case sensitive. If you put spaces in there, the spaces will matter. So just make sure you're being very careful about what's in there and communicating that with your students. My advice would be keep it simple because you don't want kids having spelling mistakes or trying to figure out where the capitalization goes and all that stuff. So I usually do a simple word, all lowercase, and that's it. You can set a time limit on the quiz. So once they start it, they will have however much time you decide to set up for them, and that's all they'll get. So if it takes them longer than that time period, then that's it. It'll submit whatever they have. So if you want to give students a time limit and you don't want to sit there trying to enforce it with a stopwatch, or they're like, well, my computer took longer to load, so I should get more time. That's one way to do it. Because it's just based on when they start. Filter IP addresses, this is pretty advanced. This is if you want to make sure students aren't taking this at home, that they are at school taking it. You can have it set to filter IP addresses, so it only uses certain IP addresses. If you want to do this, talk to the tech person at your building, and they should be able to help you out with it. Allow calculator. If you want them to have a calculator available on all of the questions, you can do that. You can choose between a basic and a scientific one. The basic one is just the basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's about it. If you want them to have square roots, exponents, sine, cosine, tangent, that kind of thing, make sure you hit scientific. Allow clearing selection. I'm really not sure what purpose this would serve other than maybe a pretest. This allows them, normally if they select an answer for, let's say, question number 5, they select C. But they didn't want C. They weren't sure what they wanted. If you have this unchecked, like I do, that means that they are locked in to have some kind of question or some kind of answer for that question. They can go back and forth and they can change their answer all they want, but once they've hit an option, that question is going to be answered. So if you click this, that will let them click back on the same thing they picked. So if they pick C the first time, they didn't want to pick C, they can click it again and it'll pull it off as a no. And then it's like the question was blank to begin with. Again, I'm not sure other than a pretest what this might be useful for, so I always leave that off. Allow multiple attempts. So if you want them to take it multiple times, you can do that. You can choose how to keep the score. So if it keeps the highest score, if it averages all of the things together, which one was latest or which one was first. So you could maybe do the first thing if you want them. So you could do the first thing if maybe you wanted them to like take an actual quiz and then you wanted them to be able to go back and kind of test themselves without it actually changing their score. You could do that. How many times that they're allowed to attempt it or reattempt it. So they get 1, 2, 3, however many it is that you want to do. And then you can also require waiting period. So if you have them where they're actually redoing it for a grade and you don't want them to just go back in and blindly guess like they did the first time, you can make them wait a certain number of days, hours, or minutes to make sure that they're, or at least try to make sure that they're not going to waste their time and your time going back and redoing these things. Then last is restrict student view. So this is going, if you have this checked, it's going to restrict what the students are able to see. So with this stuff, if you have it unchecked, when they open up the quiz, they're going to be able to see everything. So they'll be able to see the exact questions that they answered, what the correct answers were, the incorrect answers, all that good stuff. So by checking this, you can limit what that is. So I usually default it to show points awarded, so how many points they earned, versus how many points there were possible. And so it'll give them a score, but then that's it. It's not going to tell them which questions they got right, which questions they got wrong, or anything like that. You can also, if you want, you could have it just show the items in the questions. If you click this, it's going to look basically like when they took it the first time, but they're not going to see anything that they put. So it's all just going to kind of look basically like the quiz they took when they first opened it up with nothing answered. Show student response is going to show, what they answered. Then you can say whether it was right or wrong, but not necessarily show what the correct answer is. Then you can show the correct answer with the incorrect response, and then any feedback that you posted on the question. So there are a lot of different ways that you can customize those settings. Then for reports, this is something that takes about 24 hours to show up, so don't go into it expecting like that you'll immediately get to see how your students did on each question and all that stuff. Outcomes analysis, by the way, that's only set up if you put outcomes on each of the questions. It's like a way to link to standards and things like that. If you decide to do that, you can see how they did basically by standard. But if you don't do that, which I don't, you can always do quiz and item analysis. So for this, it shows your range of scores. So my highest was 100%, the lowest was a 30. It gives the mean, standard deviation, about how long it took. In Crown Box Alpha, some kind of statistical thing that I'm not sure. And then you can look at each individual question and you can see a bunch of different information about it. So first thing you get is the difficulty index. So difficulty index is basically how hard was it. The higher the number, the lower the difficulty is. On mine, all the difficulty indexes and the mean earned scores, they're all the same because for the most part, each question was worth 1 point and that was all there was to it. Discrimination index. This kind of shows, is this kind of a good question? So if you have a high discrimination index, that means that generally the students who missed the question are the ones who did worse overall on the scoring. And those who got the question right are the ones that did better. So like on this question here, it's a negative discrimination index. So that means that more of the students who missed it were the ones who did better overall. Now it's a really, really small negative discrimination index, so it's pretty much nothing. If it's just a flat 0, I think that just means straight across the board, it didn't really matter how well students did or didn't do. They all kind of missed it equally. Then like 0.48 here. So that's a bit of a higher one. So that tells me that most of the students who got this right did well on the test. Most of the students who got it wrong did not do well on it. You can also, kind of like you saw on that one, you can click down and you can see the range of scores that students got over here. Again, since mine were all basically just 1 point, it's either all or nothing because there weren't half points or partial credit available. So I can see 40% or 40 students got the question correct or got between an 80 and 100, and 11 of them got it wrong. I can also see what exactly all the students put. So 40 of them said it was chemical potential, 3 of them said gravitational, 4 said elastic, and another 4 said kinetic. I'm not sure what the RPB is. Again, another statistical thing. And of course, mean earned score is what was the mean average for it. So that's the stuff that you can get in your quiz and item analysis. And then last is moderate. So in moderate, we've got the whole list of all of the students and how they did. So it gives me the score that they got, and this would be either the most recent score or the highest score, however it is you have it set up, if you have it set up for them to take multiple attempts. How long it took, so you can pretty easily tell who actually took their time, who was able to just kind of fly through it and do well, and who just went through and hit B for every answer. This log here, this will let you see exactly what they did at each individual time. So at the time of 0 minutes and 0 seconds, it says system details captured, meaning that they put the access code and hit in, and then they started in. And so it shows every time they clicked an answer or added something in, it logged it as time. If a student were to leave the quiz, I've never actually seen this before because I normally have mine do it locked down and I go around and check periodically throughout to make sure that they're still in secure exam. But if they leave for whatever reason, it will show up as like student left exam and then system details captured again when they go back in. So this is a good way if you think a student was cheating and they were going to different tabs or leaving Canvas for whatever reason, you can go into their log and see exactly what they did. And it even tells you like at 11 minutes and 38 seconds, this student answered for this question that it was a stretch bungee cord for the answer. So you can get a lot of details with that. Then you've got a few other options. One would be accommodations. So if your students have some accommodations for testing, the only one that you can really give for like through this way easily is our time adjustments. And note that it says these settings will be applied to all course assessments for the student. So this is a really nice thing in that if you have a student who maybe always gets unlimited time, I can click this, and for every single test, even if I have a time limit put on it under the settings, it's going to make it so that students have as long as they want to take that. Time limit multiplier would be how much time do they get compared to the others. So let's say I have the time limit set to 2 hours for everybody else. If I have it set to a time limit multiplier of 1, they're still just going to get 2 hours. But if I go and I change this to 1.5, now they're going to have 3 hours. Or if I go to 2, and the normal time limit was 2 hours, 2 times 2 is 4, so now they'll have 4 hours. Or you can just do an additional amount of time and say on every test they have an additional hour that they can use. So you can do that however you want. And then there's the moderate button over here. So the moderate button will allow you to do a few things. One, you can reopen it. So once I hit that submit button, it kind of closes it out. If you hit reopen, it lets them go back in exactly where things were left beforehand. So this is useful if maybe a kid accidentally hit submit and they forgot to go back and double check some answers, or they left some questions blank that they forgot to go back and do. And you can check the log to make sure that, that they did accidentally just submit that they didn't go to other places and find the answers and all that stuff too. But you can go back in and reopen that. You can also give them additional attempts from here. This will only apply to this specific quiz. So maybe they decided to do test retakes or something based on your policies. You can say, okay, you can have an additional attempt, and then they can go back in and take it again, and it will only apply to that student. Or time adjustment. So while they're taking it, you can decide to either give them additional time or remove the time limit. But again, all the stuff that is in the moderate section here will apply only to this quiz. So if you need to do some kind of modification for a student for everything or every quiz, you're going to have to come in here every single time to that moderate section. That's the difference between moderate and accommodations. And then last are attempts here. So I can look at the attempts. So if I click on there, it'll pop up with the student's exact results. So I can see what the student put, how they missed it, all that good stuff. If you go through and maybe there was, for whatever reason, 2.5 would be an acceptable answer, I could go back in and adjust their score. So I could give them a point back on that. So you can go through and you can look and see, again, everything that they put. There's also fudge points down here. So maybe they did an extra credit question or something like that that was on paper. You could go in there and do those fudge points. If you do anything, make any changes, you do have to hit this update button down here at the bottom. Otherwise, it won't save. So you can hit that update button after you've made your changes, and it'll go back to normal, or go to whatever that new score was. So that is all of those little bits. So next are going to be item banks. So if we go back to our course, let's see. So item banks, kind of briefly touch on this a little bit. There are two ways that you can get to them. The easiest way is off on the left here when you're at your course homepage or anywhere kind of not within a quiz. You can click on the item banks button. So when you click there, it's going to open up your item banks. And so right now I don't have any banks set up for this course specifically, or my sandbox. But you can search through all banks, institution banks. So I don't know if we have the ability to have this set up or not. You can want to contact your tech coach if you're interested in doing that. But where it's banks that would be shared out basically all through Winsville. Banks shared to this course. So people have, if you or other people have shared banks specifically to this course, you can look there. Or just all banks. That's probably, if you have banks and you can't find them, you'll be able to find them there. So you can search if you have a whole bunch of different banks that you want to look through. You can change how you sort. You've got the option to share banks here with other people, just like everything else with sharing. If you click on the button, type in a name, give them the ability to view or edit, and you can go from there. The edit button here literally just lets you change the name. The trash can lets you trash a thing. So I'm going to open up this sample bank down here. If you wanted to click or start a new bank, all you have to do is just hit this add bank button, enter the name, and call it. And it'll open up in a new screen. So I've got some random questions thrown in here. One of them is from that quiz that we imported in the last video. And then these are just some random real quick ones that I threw that are complete and utter nonsense. So you can, if you want to add any more questions, you just add hit the plus new button up here. You have all the exact same options that you do in quizzes. You can even put in a stimulus and that'll drag it in. Whoops. But again, all the same exact question options. They all work the exact same way as they did before. If you want to edit the question, you can click the pencil button, go in, and change, the options there. You have all the same exact stuff that was available in the first time, or in normal quizzes. This one duplicates them again. If you want to see the details, you can click the arrow there. So there's not much difference to item banks other than that they're in a different place. Now where this is really, really useful is if we want to go to our quizzes. So if I go to open up that sample quiz, go to build. So now that I've got that item bank set up, what I can do is instead of having to import individual questions necessarily, or create individual questions, if we click this folder button here, this is for the item banks. So again, I don't have any specifically in the course, so I'm going to go to all banks, look for sample, I'll click on there. And so I could go through and decide, oh, I want to add this Ooga Booga question. So I could click the add button, and now my Ooga Booga question is in there. So you can kind of scroll through and just add stuff. You can also choose to add all of them in. So if we click this all or random, that's going to add in this option up here. And so we're going to close out of this. So one of the neat things about this is, if we go to edit, so first of all, it tells us where the sample bank is coming, or where the bank is coming from. If we pick the wrong place, we can go and pick something else. Then you have the option to use all questions. So this would be a really quick and easy way to create a quiz from an existing bank. Or you can randomly select questions. So what I really like about this is you could have different bank setups. So maybe you're doing parts of like sentence structure or something like that. And you want to have students pick out the verb in the sentence, but you don't want all the students to look at the same sentence. So you on your own or with your collaborative team could create a question bank where it's just like the verb questions, have a whole bunch of different sentences, and then you can have it randomly select, let's say, 2 questions from that bank. So all the students would still be able to get the same number of questions about the same content, same difficulty level, but the questions would be different from student to student. And then you can change how many points each question is worth. You do lose a little bit of customizability if you just import all of them like that and you don't import it one at a time, because all the questions are going to be worth the same amount. So if you want question 1 to be worth 2 points, question 2 to be worth 7, you do need to add them independently so you can go in and change the scoring value. But when you hit done, it's telling me that it's 3 points per question and 2 questions are going to be randomly pulled from that question bank. So that is item banks. The next is if you're wanting to access these the quiz in order to grade them, because the essays or file uploads, those are not going to be automatically graded by Canvas. So there are 2 ways, at least 2 ways that I figured out how to get to them. The easiest way is if you still have to grade it, it's going to be in your to-do list. So if you click on there, it'll open up SpeedGrader, and you're in here to be able to go in and grade them. So you can either scroll through if you want to go try to find them, or it says at the top, the following questions need review, and if you click on them, it takes you straight to that question, which is really nice. So write a paragraph about symbolism in the Scarlet Letter. I don't wanna, well, that didn't meet any of the requirements. So you have a few options. You could, if you hit the checkbox, that automatically gives them full points. If you hit the X, that's automatic 0. Or you can give them some amount in between there. And you can do decimal places too if you want. For the file upload, if it's a picture, so like a JPEG or a PNG, something like that, where it's a really common format, that'll actually show up within the actual question itself so you can see it. If it's not something like that, like for this one I uploaded a PDF, all you have to do is click on it, it'll try to download it, and then you can go and put in the grade there. So let's say they got that correct there. You can also go through and maybe change some grades. So maybe this one, well, we'll give them creativity for saying that they fetched a pail of boogers. So we'll give them, let's say, half a point back. There's also this regrade option. So if you click regrade, this is going to apply to every student who has already taken this thing. So, I picked a bad one to do regrade on. Let's try a different one. That's not. So let's do this one here. So we'll regrade this. So right now, this was set up to do the liver, but maybe whenever I started the quiz, I accidentally had it where they needed to look at the heart. So maybe I want to go back and, okay, I'm going to change it so that if they clicked on the heart, that would be the correct answer. So I'll hit the regrade button, and it's going to pop up with some options. Award points for a correct answer only, so that means that if they answered it correctly according to what you had the first time, and now they've missed it based on you regrading it, it will take those points away. So if you let students see the grade that they had before, that grade is going to go down. So just something to be aware of if you decide to let them see what grade they got after they finish it, and you might have to possibly go back and regrade stuff. You can award points for both current and previous answers, so that way if they got it right the first time when it was technically wrong, they still don't miss those points, so you don't wind up with unhappy students, but then the students who were supposed to get it right still get it right. Award points for any submitted answer. So if a kid just answered it in general, they get the points, or give everyone full credit. So even if they didn't answer it at all, they're still getting the credit there. Probably wouldn't use that one, but the other three options are things. Then if you hit regrade, it'll go through and do the regrading based on however it is you set it up. And it does take a little bit of time, but it's not too much. It's usually within a couple minutes, everybody's grades are updated. But anyway, whenever you're done doing all that regrading stuff and you have fudge point options down here again, you can hit the update button. And we saw that the grade went from an 8 out of 20 to a 15.1. So that's how you use SpeedGrader within this. It's pretty simple and straightforward. The other option though, so let's say if I refresh the page, for some reason let's say it's not here. The only way that I know of to get to it, and this is a pain, is you have to go to the grades column. Where is my grades option? There it is. So you go to the grade book, then you've got to go find the assignment. So this was the sample quiz. So I'm going to click the 3 dots on it, go to SpeedGrader, and then that opens it up. You cannot get to SpeedGrader through the quiz itself. It is one of the most really annoying features in Canvas that feels like it should be an easy fix, that they should just be able to put a button in there just like every other assignment to go to SpeedGrader, but you can't. So those are the 2 ways to get into SpeedGrader. Is to simply click on the to-do list, or you have to go to the grade book and then find it through there. The last random bit I've got is migrating quizzes. So let's say you've got some old quizzes that are in the classic version. But like I mentioned before, classic quizzes are going away, and so you may want to change it to new quizzes, either so it works fine, or you can get some of the new functionality with them. So looking at your quizzes, you can tell if something is classic or new based on the rocket ship. If it's a white or a hollow rocket ship, whether it's green outline or black outline, green just means things are published, black just means it's unpublished. So if it's hollow, like my balance forces quiz here, and then these 4 quizzes here, these are all classic quizzes, meaning that they're not going to work in the same exact way as the new quizzes that we've been doing. If it's a solid rocket ship, so like this one and all of these down here, those are all the new quizzes. So let's say this photosynthesis review activity, I want it to be a new quiz. All you have to do is click on the 3 dots off to the side, click the migrate button, and it takes a little bit of time, but it'll migrate it from classic to new quizzes. And it doesn't get rid of the classic ones. So if there, for some reason, are issues with how the new quiz one formatted itself, had questions, uploaded pictures, whatever, you can still go back to the old one to refer to all of those things to pretty easily change things back up.